So just introducing Dr. Sanjana Mohan. She's a pediatrician and a public health professional. She's a co-founder of Basic Health Services, which is an organization with a vision of providing high quality and low cost primary health care for underserved communities based in southern Rajasthan. Her experience spans over 20 years and includes coordinating the first research study in India on community-based management of severely malnourished children. She is an MD in pediatrics from University of Rajasthan and has studied epidemiology from the University of London. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjana, for joining us today. Like I mentioned, we have a diverse group of people who are who want to provide quality healthcare in their communities. They are people with lived experiences, caregivers, and we have a few healthcare professionals as well. So welcome to the Arohan family, and over to you, Dr. Sanjana.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Shreya, and good afternoon, everyone. And firstly, many thanks to Pallium, to ECHO for asking me for this session. And I feel it to be a privilege to be with you, with all of you who are, dealing with such difficult, challenging, but also such uplifting situations day in, day out. So what Shreya mentioned, about community mobilization. So I will share my experiences about community mobilization, which I have learned during the course of my work here in southern Rajasthan. So what does community mobilization mean to us? And what are some important lessons that we see that are important? So I would like to project. Can I project, Shreya?
Yes, you can share though.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Is this visible?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. 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 Yes. Hold on. Yes. Okay. So, what I will be talking about is all coming from southern Rajasthan, which would be different from what, most of you would be used to. Maybe some of you have seen this before. So, where I work, which is in Udaipur and Dungarpur, the rural areas are almost totally tribal, and they live in scattered habitations. A common narrative is that there will be one house on top of a hill, and the next house would be on top of the next hill. Locally, the education levels are very low. There is very little work for people to do, which results in a very high rate of male migration. So most of the men are away, and the double burden then comes to the women in the families. And I'll share more what the women are anyways going through. There is food scarcity. Diets here are mostly cereals. So cereal would be wheat in winter, wheat in the summers, and it's maize in winters, and very little of pulses, hardly any milk, and very little vegetables. So it is no surprise that we see a huge burden of malnutrition. And there is also a high burden of illnesses and many deaths, most of which are also preventable. So these are two scenes that you see here. On top right is a scene which is kind of a little after the rains are over. That's the time when the area looks green. But apart from that, for many months of the year, from winters till the rains begin, it looks a lot like what you see in the left-hand picture. It's dry, there are few trees, and the land also, there are small patches of, cultivated land, but most of it is also barren. So in these areas, we see people seeking care a lot from informal providers, who are the quacks. And quacks here are known as Bengali doctors. And no offense to any of my Bengali friends in the group, but that's how they are called. And this goes back to many, many years ago when few people had moved here from Bengal and they started medical practice, and the term has stuck. A lot of people go to traditional healers who are called bhopals, and who would then ask for things such as sacrificing maybe a hen or a goat, or making an offering at a temple. The government health facilities are of poor quality, and many a times the doctor would not be there, or if the doctor is there, there are no medicines. And then there are issues with how they speak also to a man or a woman who is going from a village to the health center. And as people here are so poor, the private qualified providers have not evolved. You will not see any private qualified doctor providing health services in the area. So the two pictures you see here, these are of the village women, and you also see the odd man here sitting and listening to our health workers who are talking to them about different issues related to health. The communities here rely a lot on their old traditions, on beliefs. So for seeking care, they would often go, to the traditional healer or to the unqualified provider. They have, the beliefs are that if a child is becoming weaker and weaker, the child has caught the evil eye. And so the child does not need medical care, but the child needs to be taken, to a goddess, and then the goddess who has gotten angry, she has to be appeased. They often start feeding children after they have turned 1, by which time they are already malnourished, because the belief is that if they start feeding child early, the child will have a bloated stomach, the child will not grow well. And they have their own thoughts about what foods to eat, but even more than this, what foods not to eat when they are ill. So like, as I spoke earlier, they eat wheat in summers and maize in the winters, and they love maize. But they are told that if they are taking any medicine, they have to stop eating maize. They also have the belief that if they are ill, they should not be eating foods which are sour, such as buttermilk or even a porridge which they make from maize. So they will stop eating these foods. And remember, they have such few options. Maybe their options can be counted on, on the fingers of one hand. And out of 5 options, if they are not eating 2 options, they have very little to eat. At times when a man or a woman is very sick and needs to be admitted, they don't want to go to a large hospital. They have older stories when some of their family members went to a hospital in Udaipur, which could be 70 to 100 kilometers from where they are living, and the person did not come back alive. So a common thought is that those who go to Udaipur don't return alive. So this becomes a big challenge when, for example, we see a woman who is pregnant and who has severe anemia, maybe a hemoglobin of 3 or 4, but not ready to go to a hospital. So this little young girl and mother on the right that you see, she first came to us with severe malnutrition, and she had been taken to traditional healers, to quacks, but she had not improved. So family gave up all hope that she would survive. But then she got linked to treatment, she got better and better, and she recovered from severe malnutrition. And below you see one of our team members who is counseling a woman with diabetes who has come to our clinic for care. So underlying the myths, underlying the traditions, is the very, very fragile position of women in the household. I think Rajasthan ranks really very low when it comes to, how strong women are within their houses, how strong women are within their communities. Very often, women, especially in rural areas, will be married off by the time they are 16 or 17. By the time they are 23, they would be looking as if they are 30. They have had maybe 3 or 4 children till then, and without enough gap between the childbirth. There is a huge preference for sons. And we've also seen situations where, for example, in a family, if there are 3 girls, the husband may sometimes even leave his wife, saying that, no, you have not born me a son, so I will now go and get another wife. There have also been situations where a woman, let's say a woman who is pregnant with severe anemia, who needs a referral, and the family, her husband's family, have said, no, we will not take her to a hospital. If something happens to her, we will get another one. So this is the situation in which we live and we work. On top, on right, you see a group of women who are waiting outside the clinic for their turn to come. They will all have their head covered. And in fact, I visited Jharkhand before COVID. And when we were talking about how in Rajasthan women have to keep their heads covered, there a woman in a very, very remote and tribal village, they were laughing. They said, oh, but here we don't ever cover our hair. So it's covering the head is one thing, but I think that covers so many things which lie beneath it. And this picture on the bottom, this always stays with me. So this was a new daycare center that was being inaugurated in a very far off village. And the community had gathered, mostly it was women, but also some men who were celebrating the start of this daycare center, which would provide care for all young children for the whole day. And then it came up that let us introduce the women who would be taking care of the children. And these are the 2 Fulwari workers. For them, this is what the introduction had to be. They would always keep their face covered fully, even though they are taking care of the children the entire day. The parents trust them, and parents also value the work they do. But this is how they would be, they would be when they were facing the men in the community. So it is in such areas that we work, and Amrit clinics are the primary healthcare facilities that we run. The clinics are in far off areas, so it could be 70 to 100 kilometers from Udaipur, which is the nearest big city. They provide preventive, promotive, and curative services, including deliveries. So many women who would earlier be delivering at home now have the chance of coming to a health facility for a safe institutional delivery. The services are available round the clock, and it's a team of doctors and nurses which manage the services. So nurses actually live there.
Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. So the nurses live there, and by living there, they provide round-the-clock services. And our nurses are all women, which also means that they have a very good rapport with the local women. You can see that in the picture below, where our nurse is examining a pregnant woman who might not have sought care ever earlier during a pregnancy. But now with the clinic being there, she is able to come and seek care. She's able to get her tetanus shots. She's able to get iron, calcium. And on the right, you see the team, which is nurses, health workers, our doctors. And they are all together because they have just been to a village following up patients with malaria during a time when there was an outbreak of malaria in the area. So in addition to health services, or rather a part of the health services also, community education to help promote a behavior change. So these communities have been away from modern medicine for decades. So our role here is to provide knowledge, to build awareness about important conditions. For example, a woman may not want to have a child soon after she has already had a child, but she may not know how she can delay her next childbirth. So that's something that we do. We talk to them about the different options that are available and if they are interested in any, and where can they get these services. We also challenge the age-old beliefs and help change their practices for promoting health. So for example, tuberculosis is a big problem in these areas, but there is also a lot of fear about it. Fear being that if a person is diagnosed with TB, then the neighbors would stop talking, would stop visiting him. And a common term that they would say is, कि उस घर का तो हम पानी भी नहीं पिएंगे. They will not even drink water at that person's home. So a person who has TB will keep hiding it, keep hiding till it gets to a stage where he can hide it no more. The condition is so much worse. And that's when he or she would come to seek care. But by then, the disease is much advanced. So we keep talking to them about what tuberculosis actually is, that there is not so much need to fear it, and the stigma around it also can go with knowledge. And with this, with their improved understanding, it helps change their practices so that they come out and start seeking care early. So on the right, you see our health worker. She is explaining to mother of a young child how malnourished the child is. She has the growth chart on which the child's nutritional status is plotted. She is explaining how malnourished the child is and what all should the mother feed the child. And you can see how much interest the mother has in trying to know more about this. And on the left are the health workers who are holding a session on malaria, where they are showing how the bed net is to be used and what is the value or what is the benefit from having a bed net, and how lethal malaria can be if it is untreated. And we have seen that with such sessions, there is much greater interest of communities, and slowly their practices start to change. So just like 3 years ago, during the outbreak, we would see hundreds of people coming to us with malaria. We also saw some deaths due to malaria. And malaria is a condition where there should be nobody dying because there are such good medicines available. But because of delays, because of not taking proper treatment, ultimately, this would be the outcome. But from the time we are holding education sessions, from the time there is treatment available, we are seeing that even the number of cases of malaria is now slowly coming down. So who all are there in our team who carry out community mobilization? So our strong pillars, or our stars, if I can say, are our volunteers. They are called the Swasthya Kiran. They are local village women who build awareness in their communities, in their village, in their neighboring villages on health, on nutrition. The Swasthya Kirans are, we stay very close with them. There are regular trainings as well happening. And till now, Swasthya Kirans have identified hundreds of sick men, women, and children from their villages, and they have linked them for care. And they have just transformed their lives. So, I will talk of tuberculosis, of severe malnutrition, people who the family members had given up and who they thought that would not survive, the Swasth Kirans have linked such people to the clinic, and then the man, the woman have gotten better fully. So you see below a group of village women. While they may look to be, very quiet, and that they could not hurt a fly, but when it comes to identifying and to connecting a sick woman, a sick man, there you have to just see their energies and their confidence. So much so that the woman that you see on the right, she is one of our older Swastikiran. So last month, there was a young man around 20 years who came with severe tuberculosis, with with oxygen levels falling, who needed to be admitted in a hospital. But unfortunately, his parents had died and there was nobody to go with him. So we were asking all around, asking for somebody to volunteer to come with him and stay with him for a few days. Because if he had not gotten that care, he might not have survived. And this is when our Swasth Kiran, Lalki Bai, she volunteered. And she came. Here she is sitting in the ambulance, coming with Thavra, the young man, to Udaipur. And she also told us, she says that, Didi, I had not been to Udaipur. And this is the first time I stayed in the hospital, but what to do? If I did not do that, then, Thavra might have fallen even more sick. So she came, she stayed with him 4-5 days, and he got better. And in that time, a cousin of his came over and she was freed and she went back home. And if she had not come, then the outcome would have been very, very different. Yeah. So at clinics, we also have advisory groups. These are local influential people who could be local panchayat representatives. In southern Rajasthan, in villages, the elders are called as Gadda Gameti. Some such people are also members of the advisory group. Some could be old patients who have taken treatment from the clinics, but now are very convinced with the services of the clinics. So this is a very important group for us. They work both ways. They will serve at the clinic. They will come with comments from the community. So a common issue which community feels here is that we don't use injections enough, whereas the quacks, they use a lot of injections. So their grudge is that why don't we use injections? We should be using them more. So the advisory members will bring the request to us that, please you start giving more injections. But for us, that creates an opportunity to talk more about what is, rational treatment, why are unnecessary injections harmful, what problems can be there with, indiscriminate use of injections. So, they are voice of the community for us, but for the community, they are also our voice, both in the community and the external world. So if there is a woman with severe anemia whose family has refused to take her to Udaipur for a blood transfusion, the advisory member would visit the family at home and would counsel them and would also push them, motivate them to go to Udaipur. And we've seen many such difficult situations have been salvaged because of the interest and enthusiasm of the advisory group member. And I remember 2-3 years ago, there was a time, it was during the rainy season, there was a heavy rain, and there was a woman in labor where the baby had stopped moving. So this was an emergency and she needed to be brought to Udaipur, but the family just refused. So the advisory member, he went to her home in the middle of pouring rain and went and spoke to the family, and the family then agreed. The advisory members also speak to the local government to further the cause of good quality healthcare for the communities. So for institutional deliveries, you might be aware that there is an incentive that the woman gets, and it's called the Janani Suraksha Yojana. Now, in our new clinics, the clinics were not yet recognized for getting this incentive to provide to the women who are delivering here. So the advisory members decided to write a letter to the local health officials, and they went there and put in this request that please give recognition to Amrit Clinic in Morwal for Janani Suraksha Yojana. So on the right, you see the group of advisory members in one of the clinic, and they are all together launching the list of advisory members, the chart of advisory members to be displayed at the clinic. And on the left, I think the picture is quite self-evident. This is one of our advisory members who decided that he would get soap and distribute it in the community in post-COVID. So here he is distributing soap and also explaining and also showing hand washing to a man in the village. Yeah. So another of our thrust areas are these peer groups or support groups. This is the tuberculosis patients coming together every month at the clinic. So tuberculosis is a big problem in our area. And as I shared earlier, there are also so many fears and myths. So this need emerged of the patients all coming together and sharing their experiences. And we saw that with this experience, even the patients who have been diagnosed recently and who are more fearful, they get to listen to the older patients who share with them that don't worry, you will get very well. And we hear people saying, you see me, I've been taking treatment for 3 or 4 months and I am now much better. So they will compare it. They will say 75 paisa in a rupee, I am better now. रुपए में 75 पैसा तो मैं ठीक हो गया. Or a patient who has been there for a month or two may say कि it's 50 paisa in 1 rupee that I am better. And we see how this affects the newly diagnosed patients as well. So every month they come together. They also share about the different foods that they are eating. So people will say that we don't eat sour foods, but then the patients who have been on treatment for several months, it is they who will say that don't worry, you eat everything. And then at the end of the discussion, people will say, oh, we learned this new thing that we can eat. And somebody may say, I wish I had brought my mother also. She's the one who keeps refusing to give me charge. So on the right is a group of patients who have just participated in an exercise of drawing the flag and the 3 colors of the flag. And then they discuss, okay, which are foods that are yellow or orange in color, which are foods which are white in color, and green colored foods. And these are all that we have to eat. And the picture on the left is quite special for us. So this was a TB patient who learned in the last session that she could eat oil and ghee. And oil and ghee are also foods that they stop eating. No? So imagine a person with tuberculosis who is sick, who has been sick for many months, whose appetite is also so poor, and then being told that you have to cook your vegetables in water. So many such patients come to us and they tell us that I have lost all appetite. And then when we speak, we find out that the reason is that they have stopped putting oil or ghee in their food. And once they start doing it, then their appetite also starts getting better very fast. So this woman in the last session, she learned how to make fried matris. So this is a common snack that we eat here, maybe a bit like murukku in the southern part of the country. So last meeting she learned, and the next meeting she made these and she brought in the meeting to share with the other patients. And her joy and her sense of pride is something which really warms our hearts whenever we see this. Okay, So, what are the things that are needed, or what are the things to remember when working on mobilization? So I'll just share some of the principles that we have arrived at, some of the things to always remember in our mind. So the purpose of communication or mobilization needs to be very clear whenever we are out to discuss, whether it's with a group of TB patients, whether it's in a community meeting in the village. So what is it that we want to talk about today? The conversation could be around malaria, what malaria is, and why do we need to worry about malaria? When should the community become alert that the woman sitting before us, when should she be alert that she could be having malaria or a family member could be having malaria? So the the objective or the purpose of the session needs to be really defined before we start our conversation. We talk about making sure that there is space in the mind, and space in the mind both of the person who is conducting the meeting and also of the women who are sitting before her or before him. So the person who is conducting the session could be speaking very nicely about the different choices that there are for women, but the woman in front, maybe her mind is elsewhere. Maybe she's thinking about the how her crop did not turn out so well. Where will her food come from? So whenever we are discussing anything with the whether with our volunteers or with the woman, one needs to make sure that both the woman and us have this space in our mind so that conversation can flow. Uh, the art of listening, I can't talk enough about this, but it's so important to really listen to what the person in front of us is saying through her words, maybe through the gestures as well. So it's not that the person who is taking the session has to keep on speaking and keep on sharing of information, but needs to be mindful, needs to pause whenever there is some there's some message, some comment coming from the person before us. And this is also related to the conversation being two-way, where there is sharing of information, but also learning of questions that may be there. Unless it's two-way, it ends up as being a session. It's like a speech which happens, and but after that, how much is retained and how much is there enough value in this? That is a big question mark. Then paying attention to the body language, the the eyes, the connection of the eyes, the eye-to-eye contact, and also sitting at the same level as the person before us. Many times one would see that the nurse or the health worker is sitting on a chair, but the group before is sitting on the ground. That is a no-no. One has to be at the same level. Only then can there be a proper eye-to-eye contact. Only then is there a sense of comfort and a sense of connection between the two. And also touching, touching the patient. Of course, COVID has now changed things. There has to be the social distance between the person taking the session and others. But we have seen that even with social distance, patients can, or even young children can see the expression in the eyes, and even that helps in connecting. So one has to really be careful, take care about the body language as well. So now another thing is about the continuity of communication. There is one meeting, let's say in a village in a month, that needs to be carried forward, month after month. There is, if this connect stays, then the the knowledge gets consolidated. Then slowly the practices start changing. If it's a one-off, then there might be some change, but we have seen that such change does not last long. So this continuity has to be there, whether you talk of advisory groups, whether you talk of the Swasthya Kiran, or the group of TB patients. One has to keep meeting with them month after month. And we see with that, things start changing. Another important part is to be always, to never be dismissive, but be respectful. Many a times the practices that we see are not rational. For example, going to a traditional healer and sacrificing a goat, it's not the right thing. And as doctors, as nurses, as healthcare workers, we know that such a practice will end up wasting time, wasting money, and causing the disease to maybe worsen over time. But it's not done to, to criticize it, to make fun of it. What we follow is we also respect what they are doing. At the same time, also asking them to do what is the right thing to do at that stage. So if it's a severely malnourished child who has earlier gone to a quack, we would urge the mother and the father to now bring the child to the primary healthcare facility, where the child would be checked, where the investigations would be done, and the required treatment would be started. Now, another thing is about striking conversations. It's going beyond conversations of the illness, of the need, but it's about talking of, other conversations. It's conversations that one has with one's friend. So, trying to find out more, knowing the person sitting before us better. Which village does she come from? What water does she drink? Where does her husband work? Where do her children go to study? And we've seen that striking, speaking to them more about which is different from the health needs. This, makes us richer. This makes us know them better. And we also see them, the visible change happening. We see the woman sitting with us, relaxing, opening up. She starts to smile. And then she starts asking us more questions, even related to her health. So this is something that we would earlier not remember so much. But 2 years ago, there were a series of workshops that were done by this very wise old person, Mr. D.K. Bose. So he kind of helped put these all together. And since then, we have been following these much more, and we see the huge value that comes when, for example, you are talking more, when you are also listening more. So now at the heart of the mobilization, we think it is trust and care. So once the community starts to trust us, they are more willing for a change and for following maybe the right practice. And also when they believe that we care for them. And how does trust and care come? It comes from all the things that you see around. So, and there might be other views about this as well. But what I'm sharing here is something that we have seen from our work and from our practice. When all these different elements come together, they really have an impact in, people starting to question their beliefs and in thinking, okay, there is maybe there is this change that they might do. So for a pregnant woman who has never ever gone for a checkup because her earlier pregnancies happened nicely at home. So she might think, why does she now need to go and take care? And that's what her mother-in-law will also tell her, because her mother-in-law might have delivered all her babies at home with no care at all. So why would now her daughter-in-law now go to a clinic and get a checkup done? But once she starts to trust the health workers who are sharing about the value of care during pregnancy, once she starts believing that yes, this this worker Manju or Pushpa, she cares for me. Once that happens, she is now more willing to go herself and get a checkup done. So these are important elements to for community mobilization, as we see. But how does effort at community mobilization stay sustained? I think for this, being enthusiastic and optimistic is very important. And for a doctor or a nurse who is seeing a sick woman, or let's say a woman with diabetes, there is a very clear product available, the medicine to be given. When you are talking about community mobilization, there is no such tangible product. So here, enthusiasm and optimism is really important to spread to others, to get them also energized and get the others to participate into it. Being, encouraging, recognizing the role of the communities. We see this as being very important. Once the role is, once the role of the of, let's say, the man or the woman is more clear, we see how much it energizes the person himself and how much of a ripple effect it has in the entire village. So what you see here on the right, these are parents of a TB patient who had come to us with discussions, interactions. We learned that they were ready to start with poultry. And then we had this opportunity of helping them get a number of hens. We asked them if they were willing. They said yes. They took the birds and then they built the shelter for the birds themselves. Now, this was a very, very unique thing. The first time it had happened, not only in the village, but in the entire area. So we saw how with continued connection and with some support, the family became so much stronger. They are now ready for carrying forward backyard poultry at the back of their house, both for income generation as well as for consumption at the home. And we are also seeing how many other families in the neighborhood also are now interested and have started with smaller experiments at setting up backyard poultry behind their home. We think, and finally, it's also very important to be always on the lookout for the successes and identify successes and keep sharing them. So this child with the beautiful smile that you see is one such success. The child first came to us with severe malnutrition. Her mother had tuberculosis. They were both started on treatment and follow-up and continued counseling. And we saw how the mother, who was not feeding her child well earlier, she started taking care of the child better, getting the child proper treatment, and the child slowly blossomed. The mother also got better, and in a few months, here is the child who has recovered from severe malnutrition, and the mother also has completed the treatment. It's another thing that in this course, the father of the child also developed tuberculosis and was started on treatment. But over the course of months, he also then completed his treatment. So, sharing of this story with the health workers, with the Swasthya and others, we see what a positive effect it has and how much it builds up their own confidence, builds up their own enthusiasm, and helps promote linkages of more and more such people from the communities. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjana, for sharing the journey of basic health services and working in rural parts of India, which is definitely not easy. And I think the name of the organization is so apt. Like sometimes we just forget that basic health services are such a requirement in our country because a lot of people here and come from urban areas or bigger cities, and we forget. And the work that you've done with mobilizing the community, you can see a lot of the staff are from the community itself. So I think that also kind of built trust. So we are open for questions. Please, you can speak or type in your questions. I have a question that's in the chat box. Dr. Sanjana, there's a question from Gina. Gina's asked you, you mentioned that, oh, sorry, just 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. You mentioned about ancient traditions and beliefs. Did you face any opposition or antagonism from the people when you started working there?
Yeah. Thanks, Gina. So yes, there was some opposition that we faced. So, and this also comes to, this kind of this notion that, are all the people in villages also, kind of open. But what we saw was that, as are people in cities, so are people in villages as well. You will find people who are ready to support you, but then there will also be others who would have maybe their own interests and who would not want, such services to reach people. So like when we started one of our clinics, that clinic happened to be just in front of a temple. And when the clinic was mostly renovated, then this view came up from the people that we would not allow deliveries to happen here because it is in front of the Devi temple and it is not right. It will make the place impure. So there was a lot of resistance, and they, insisted that we sacrifice a goat for this. So there were a lot of negotiations, but finally we did have to sacrifice a goat at that time. Even after that, they said we will still not allow because there was a tree there, and with the tree kind of hanging over the clinic, it would not be right to have deliveries happen there. So, but by that time we also, we were a bit older with the work, so we said no, we will get the tree cut, but the deliveries will have to happen here, and the clinic will start. So yes, there are times when there is some opposition. In fact, even right now in one of our clinics, because our partner organization also works on mobilizing communities to access their entitlements. Entitlements, for example, under the PDS, the ration that they get, or the employment that they get under NREGA. So there was this group who were a bit threatened because the community was now asking for the entitlement. So they came to us with this order that we will have to stop our services. So this is still under, this is a work in progress still. So having said that, I would also say that while there is some resistance, we also see people opening up a lot, and people who are opening up and accepting, these are the people who are in the majority. So many people come to us, they share about how they are benefited from the services, how there are new things that they have learned. So I think the energy which we get from this group, this is enough to keep us going And even if there are roadblocks, we are able to kind of deal with them.
Pranabda, please, your question.
I can't hear.
Pranabda, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry.
No problem. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjana. Hats up to you for your noble mission and your organization. Your presentation reminds me of in the year 1976 to 1981, when I was engaged in All India project of shifting cultivation of the tribal areas of South India. And yeah, I was employed in the Anthropological Survey of India, and I was posted in Mysore. So I visited the villages, tribal villages, remote tribal villages. There is no communication, there is no conveyance. And one day, when I was telling them to, will make survey of the shifting cultivation area, one tribal Sarwa, they resisted me.
Okay.
So they told, no, we will not allow you to survey our field because it is our right to practice shifting cultivation. So then I told them, there was an interpreter with me. There's an interpreter with me. So they called their head from other village, and a meeting was a meeting happened was there, and in that meeting I spoke with body language and all these things. They trusted me, and this your trust and care is very important clue, an important thing, that if we create trust, so we will not face any obstruction. But sorry to say that they are very underprivileged. They are hardly they eat 6 months food they have. Nutrition, malnutrition is there. So one question is there to you, that in South Rajasthan, why TB, tuberculosis,
is
the prime disease?
Okay.
Have you found out the root cause?
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Pranabda. The story.
Have you found out the root cause?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So firstly, thanks, Pranabda, of your story, which took us back so many years ago. And also, you're saying that trust and care is important. It again reinforces, our thinking. Thank you. So for TB being here, there are multiple reasons. So one is that the high levels of malnutrition. There is so little food available. Mostly it is cereals. So people are anyways malnourished, whether it is women, children especially, and also men. Then from here, there is a very high rate of migration, which is mostly to Gujarat, but also to Maharashtra. And it's mostly men who go, and there they work in hazardous situations. So they could be working in construction. There are many men who work in mines, and they live in very, very small, overcrowded rooms without much light, without much nutrition. So there is also this occupational hazard, which makes them, puts them at risk for TB. Then there are these huge fears which stay on, because of which they keep delaying delaying seeking care till the disease is much advanced. And then the treatment also becomes more difficult. And in the process, the disease also spreads to other family members. And then fourthly, it's also that they have such few opportunities to take good quality care. We see that even
Right.
people who are, for example, in Ahmedabad will not be able to go to the hospitals there. They will go to, small, they would go to quacks in their neighborhood, spend a lot of money still, but get substandard care. So they will carry on for a few months till the disease keeps spreading. So that's another reason. So so tuberculosis is more than an infection. What
Yeah,
we
yeah,
say
yeah,
is it is
yeah.
infection disease, but also a social disease.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjana. Actually, while I was surveying in that remote tribal villages, means that they were forest dwellers. Actually, forest dwellers they were. So in Kerala also, Palghat, Attapadi, I surveyed, but then I queried that when you are sick, what do you do? Because there is no quack doctor, no health center, nothing else. They told that we take medicine from the herbal, from the trees, from the
Okay.
leaf, from the root, and they know that what is what and what is
Okay.
the that. But one, I was moved from that time, the hospitality of them. When we reached the village, they offered they offered me good heart, but one rice, the rice and all these things. But this healthcare system and another thing, this one in Rajasthan, is there any um, palliative care approach is there or nothing is there in your area?
Yeah. So, Prananda, in our
Palliative care is
so palliative care is a growing field only. It's very little. So
Yeah.
I have seen,
Yeah.
I've seen palliative care being offered in Jaipur, but Udaipur still has a long, long way to go. And I absolutely agree. The tribal communities, people are so hospitable. Even now, when I go
Right.
to their homes, they may not have milk. So they drink black tea, and
Yeah.
the tea with milk they will call as English tea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
go, they will light the chulha.
They offer.
They don't have gas. They will
They
light the
offer.
chulha. Yes, and they will make tea and offer.
They offer, and from the core of the heart.
True.
Thank
true.
you, Sanjay.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Prananda.
Madam, am I audible? I am Dr.
Yes,
Ajayan from Ajayan from Pali Vidya. If there is trust and care in the center, why can we propagate the post?
The clinics serve a population of around 15,000. And the needs are, so there are a lot of infections, TB, we have spoken about at length. There is malaria, there is diarrhea, and others. Also now the burden of non-communicable diseases is growing. So we are seeing a lot of diabetes and hypertension. And I'm afraid that in the coming years, this burden will keep growing. So with all this work, we are not able to provide immunization ourselves directly, but we are seeing that working with the government, this is able to work out because that is a clear mandate for the ANMs to do.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Dr. Sanjana, there's one more question from Avtar.
Yeah.
He's asked, how long did it take for you to mobilize and awaken the community on your agenda? As in, how many years did you all work? Yeah.
Okay. So I think Ms. Avtar and Shreya, thank you for the question. So it's still a work in progress. I think with time mobilize. So I would say that 1 year of our being there, within a year, this trust had started building, mobilization started happening. So the early changes that we started seeing was that earlier when we would first go to the villages for the checkup of pregnant women, they would not want to come from their home to the session, which would be like maybe 200 or 300 meters. Later, they started coming to the clinic and walking maybe 5-6 kilometers also. Then similarly for tuberculosis, while early they would not eat sour foods and oil and ghee, this started changing. So from, I would say, 1 year onwards, we are seeing this the change happen. But there is so much to be done, Shreya, that there are still challenges and which lie before us. For example, things like getting people to agree for a referral. What do you do if there is a woman with severe anemia? This doesn't come easy. And how do you get people to agree to donate blood if needed? So we see that maybe more than half of people who are families of a child or a woman with severe anemia don't agree. But even here, while there are so many people not agreeing, the people who do agree, that gives us hope. And this number we are seeing as growing from the past. And we feel optimistic that, with continued efforts and also with the ripple effect in the community itself, things would start to get better.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sanjana. I have a few more questions in the chat, but will anyone want to speak? Ask the questions themselves. Okay, so there is a comment by Purnima ma'am and Colonel Raghunath Banerjee. They've written that they feel that there is due to such lack of education and blind faith, this tends to happen. Even in interiors of Maharashtra, one of the girls who worked in their household had a large scar on her forearm, which was attributed because of a treatment of a persistent fever. And she was scalded with a hot iron rod. On the other hand, we have a comment from Deepa where she says, even though the urban society is educated, they still have inhibitions. So do you think it's education? Yes, it is a basic need, but do you think it's education that, or being educated, that it's as in accept any sort of healthcare? I don't know if I'm getting the question right, but I hope
Right.
you understand. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think in India also things are not so black and white also. So the answer to your question also, I think, is both yes and no. So education does help. It does help to a large extent. People are more informed and also maybe more easy to accept the other point of view. But at the same time, as Deepa mentioned, that in urban areas also, so much this belief still prevail. In fact, I am reminded that in the last 2-3 months, a close relative of mine was very, very sick. And then they were told that there is this, ash, which is, if it is taken and smeared on his leg, he will get better. So the family did that. And I think, in such dire situations, one is kind of clinging to hope, whichever way it is coming. So doing the right thing, but also doing things which might not be, scientific in that sense. So, so it's both ways. But at the same time, we have also seen people, and especially women, who are not educated, but the way they start seeing the value of good health, good nutrition, and their own commitment towards this is just so remarkable. The story that I shared of our Swasthya Kiran Lalki Bai, the one who went with the young boy, she's not educated, but she came to the hospital here. She stayed for 3-4 days. So her not being educated did not come in her way of going out and helping.
Thank you for answering that so well. Any other queries? Sam, anything from you? We've seen your videos on now.
Yeah. Doctor, thank you so much. That was really enlightening. Just the thought and the way you seem to be dealing with them is so gentle and nice. I think many of the participants have mentioned that as well. I was wondering, TB is a contagious disease, and it can spread through people in close proximity to the patient. And is that one of the reasons why there is so much of the prevalence of tuberculosis there? Because most other parts of India also we have that. Even in the cities, we have quite a few cases of TB being prevalent.
Okay, yeah. So Sam, here, I think the multiple reasons that I also spoke of earlier, the levels of malnutrition and their occupational hazard. I think these are big factors. The good thing about these areas is that people are a lot in the open. There isn't so much overcrowding or closed spaces. Their houses also these are small huts, and they live mostly as nuclear families. So, and that on top of that, in the daytime, they are mostly out. So these are some good things, but still not enough to kind of negate the effect of nutrition and the occupational hazards and the fact that there are no good quality healthcare around them. So, in fact, something interesting is that in the times of COVID also, these areas, we did not see much of COVID. And while there were lots of fears and also many false beliefs in the area, but they still said that because we are out in the open, we work and we sweat so much, so corona just dies away.
Thank you.
Dr. Sanjana.
Should I tell something?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Many may not agree. The education, which was just a topic just before, being education, I think that not the certificate, not the master degree or honors degree or something like that. This volunteering or community advocacy, community education means he or she must have a feeling, and that feeling will urge them to communicate in a better way. That's feeling and observation. This is, I think, in our palliative care, it is the education, basic education, not the certificate. I may be wrong, I may be contradictory, but this is my opinion.
No, thank you so much, Pranabda. I have actually noted what you said, that education is not a certificate, and feelings and observations. I think these are words full of wisdom.
I feel so, Dr. Sanjana. While working among the people, among the community, among the patients, I think that if I don't go to their level, go down to their level, what I will tell, it will just go away their head. It will not penetrate. So I think that we should communicate in such a way for mobilization that they must understand, and we have the feeling, and that feeling should be aroused. That is education.
True. Thank you, Sumanta. Thank you.
Doctor, have you got any services of any volunteers or social workers for better communication?
Okay.
Because mobilization needs better communication also. Education as well as communication is very, very important aspect. Have you got any volunteer service or social worker service for that?
Uh, so yes, Dr.
Ajay.
Ajay.
Okay.
Huh. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Ajay, for your question. So, as you know, this is a team approach, and yes, there are people with diverse backgrounds. So there are doctors, there are nurses, there are nutritionists, there are also people who are social workers, and at the community, the volunteers, and together we are able to then kind of respond to the needs and the challenges. And in fact, for us, this has been an important lesson also, that it is a team, it's teamwork that helps in providing comprehensive and good quality care. And I think this point is also important, Dr. Ajay, that a lot of the times in conversations, people talk about doctors. And our primary healthcare system also, it speaks so much about doctors. And in fact, the doctors also get a bit overburdened with responsibilities. Whereas actually, what is needed probably is a team, each having their own responsibilities. Because even, for example, talking to people, maybe nurses do it much better. Whereas when it comes to, really kind of assessing and identifying and diagnosing, that's where doctors have their strength. So yes, to answer to your question,
okay. Teamwork is very important. Teamwork. Okay, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjana. Based on your question, I'm going to go to Sylvia's question. How do you motivate your team against any kind of pushback? And as you had mentioned, Sylvia, yes, they are from the community itself. Most of your team members are from the community. And how do you motivate them to?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, our team is mostly from the neighboring areas, and this is our nurses and health workers. So when we started, then our nurses were more city women, but we realized that they were not able to settle and stay on in villages. And then what evolved was that local women who came from areas maybe 30 to 40 kilometers away, they are the ones who are now most of our nurses. They have studied nursing, and they are the ones who are there in the clinic. So I think for more, there are several elements to this. So even in our vision, and something that we always remember, Shreya, is we speak of healthcare for the underserved communities, care which is high quality, low cost, and provided with dignity. And for us, the dignity is essential. So it is there in our vision, and we also try to also follow it in true sense, even in the work, which means that any conversations anywhere, whether it is doctor nurse, it is nurse, it is health worker nurse, or it is our nutritionist health worker, the dignity has to be upheld. And we think this gives a kind of a foundation for well-being. Then also we see ourselves, Shreya, as a learning organization. And I think there's also no choice, because primary healthcare is such, just imagine you have diabetes, severe diabetes on one hand, and then there is a woman in labor, then there is a child with severe malnutrition, an adult male with tuberculosis. So the team has to be ready for handling all these such diverse conditions. So learning is a big part of our work, and a lot of effort goes in building up the knowledge and skills. And we see this as being a big factor, in keeping the staff also informed and also motivated. And then I think a senior colleague had once mentioned about the raisins in the porridge. So, any successes that we see in the field, it could be a young boy who family had given up as who would not survive, but then he jumps out of it. He gets well and he starts a new life again. I think recognizing and sharing such stories, this is something which really warms everyone's heart, and this kind of takes care of their aches and tiredness also.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sanjana. Any more queries or questions or comments? Anything? Dr. Sanjana, I've got lovely comments about, I can share the chat with you. And any other queries? We've got 10 more minutes. So we have a tradition with this group that we always go beyond 4:30. So I don't want to break that tradition.
Absolutely.
So yes. So I just wanted to also discuss about, you discussed about the role of volunteers, even in, so in Trivandrum where Pallium works, most of our volunteers are educated in terms of, a lot of them are retired professionals. So they do understand the need, and it's much easier in terms of spreading the message. And palliative care in general in Kerala, it's much easier to talk about it than other parts of India as well, which has been a challenge. So I think this, the group that we're working with will be working in some way or the other with communities, whether it's their neighbors or their society building to anywhere. So you would be working with some community or the other, and everyone has their own set of challenges. So yes, I think any other comments? No more questions. One more question has come in. Sorry. Yeah. One question from Sylvia is, which has been your most challenging moment in your work environment?
Okay. So I think so. I'll talk of two such situations. So one is, I spoke about our nurses being local women. So they are mostly first generation, first generational professionals in the families. So the lure of a government job is very strong. And whenever there are government openings, they will leave. So there was a time when half of our nurses left. So that was a bit of a challenge. But then we came around, and our existing nurses, they really kind of rose to the occasion, and we were able to handle the situation. I think last year was very challenging for all of us. When COVID came, at that time, we suddenly had the lockdown, and there wasn't enough clarity on, on the do's and don'ts, on how severe is the condition. And that was the time also when a lot of the health facilities, they just shut down on the work. Even the hospitals, they stopped seeing cases which could suspected COVID. In the villages and around villages also, the primary health centers, which were anyways not doing very well, not doing much, they shut down even their work. So for us, the challenge was, what do we do which would be, safe for the staff, but also which would make sure that services reach the communities. So that was a big challenge at that time. And for our staff also, there were a lot of pressure coming from their families for our nurses. The families would say that, why are you working? All the others have come home. You also please come home. So that was tough. But I think together, from whatever evidence that had collected till then, we were able to come up with guidelines which ensured that the staff also stayed protected, but also that the services were not disrupted. So we shifted our outdoors from inside the room to out in the open, where the risk of transmission was lower, then started maintaining a distance, use of masks. So with that, we were able to continue services. And then there were multiple more challenges, that because the transport all stopped, so people were not able to come to us. So we were very worried about the diabetes, the hypertensive who were taking care from us, the patients with tuberculosis. So then the staff listed out all such patients and they visited them at home to give medicines for maybe a month. There were lots of families who did not have food to eat at all. They have such a hand-to-mouth existence that a few days of stoppage of work meant they had no food. So then identifying such families and providing them food to at least carry on for a few days till things got better. So I think the last year was very challenging, but also for us, it made us feel also blessed and privileged that we have this opportunity to work.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjana. We have one more question for you. Why is your work limited only to Southern Rajasthan? Are you planning to expand?
Okay, so that is a question which keeps coming. Whether you expand you scale up or you go into depth. So that's something which we keep talking about, and frankly, there is no clear answer. But yeah, so we work in Udaipur and nearby Dungarpur as well, where we run a government primary health center. We work in these areas, but at the same time, there is some work which we see, which we can do more, so that whatever we are seeing and learning in this tiny corner of Rajasthan does not stay here. So, we do a lot of writing and sharing of what we see here. And we also partner with other organizations to be able to, reach larger areas. And in fact, something which makes us happy is that, so two doctors who were with us earlier. So one doctor hailed from UP, from Ayodhya. So he has gone back there. He started his own services. So we like to believe that in some way, the learning from here is going there as well. Another doctor was from Bihar. He has recently started telemedicine there. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you. Any other questions?
Shreya, yeah, I'd like to have a go,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Sanjana, it is a well-known fact that in the rural parts of India, there is actually a great wealth of natural treatments that are used, especially in our country. And just to give you one example, I mean, when people have chicken pox or herpes, it's a very common thing to apply neem leaves paste, or just put them on the bed and saying that it will help in the earlier drying of the sores that come up. So things like that. I mean, I was just thinking, when as a city-bred person or living in a city, it's probably my biggest bottleneck to going and talking to these people in the rural areas would be my not being aware of their culture, their traditions, and stuff like that. Because and especially as a man, for example, if I were to go to Rajasthan, even to the other rural parts of India, there's a lot of though they may not cover their heads like they do in Rajasthan, there's a big hesitation to speak to some stranger. So yeah, it is a time-consuming process. But I was just wondering, is trying to learn from them about their own ways of coping a good start, like an icebreaker to get them to get to know us and we get to know them? And then when we try and use some of their methods, if they are viable, I mean, if they really work, can we use that as a tool to get them to listen to what we are offering them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm glad, Sam, you asked this question. So I'm also, thinking more from what you are saying. So one thing is, the people here in Rajasthan, these areas are a little different in the sense that here the local, whether it is forest, whether it is crops, what was available to them earlier, that has really shrunk. The forests are now, and I think it's not only unique to here, but we see this in many parts of the country, that the forests are shrinking. So
Yes.
people do talk about foods that they had earlier, which are not there anymore. So even
Yes.
so, I was surprised that there was ragi used to be grown here as well, but you don't see it. There are many other millets which were grown, which have just gone away because now they are into growing wheat and maize, in the two crops of the year. So the traditional medicines which would have existed earlier, a lot of them I think have gone. But frankly, you have also asked me to now get into this inquiry more with them on other traditional methods that they might have used. Yes, so neem, yes, they use a lot. The they kind of burn neem leaves, and the fumes from there are protective against malaria as well. So
Yes.
there are some methods, but I think some have disappeared with disappearance of the jungles, and also the livestock, their disappearance as well. But that's something that would be good to also probe more specifically.
Thank you.
And sorry, just one more thing, and this thing that you mentioned, I think honest conversations in building trust with them. So building a trust and then talking more. That's something that Pranabda also spoke of.
Yeah, I think like Pranabda also rightly mentioned, we have to go down to their level of communication and comprehension level, because most of the time, like he rightly pointed out, it would go right over their heads if we talked about big scientific facts and the research that was done and all that. So what I'm trying to do in my own work is that try and find natural remedies wherever possible, which are again, there are a few which have been double-blind tested and researched, which still, even in our own country, they are not known, though they are based totally on Indian, plants available here and all the resources available here. Give you one example, since Shreya and the whole team in Parliament is in Kerala, there's this thing called Jackfruit 365. Which is it's the flour made from jackfruit, and it is double-blind tested and researched for helping with diabetes, bringing down the glycemic index levels. And even though it's proven, it is such a big task for the people to even to promote it. So recently I just put it on my website as one of the products that I sell on my e-commerce site. So, and then people ask me all kinds of questions. So I was wondering, I mean, it's available freely out there. It's there on Amazon, which reaches millions of people, and still people don't know about it. And it's right available in India, and it is proving to be a big boon to people who have all given their testimonials that they've used it for so many months, and they've found that they, and we are fighting diabetes. I mean, it's like crazy. Every third person seems to be having diabetes today in our country. And I was just thinking, maybe we can use our indigenous things that are available and be able to reach people in the rural area even better. Because the city people, like somebody mentioned in the chat, because we are educated, we have an ego problem. We won't listen to what somebody else says. But the rural people will generally be more, open to taking some details from us, I guess.
Mm-hmm. No, sure. Thanks for suggesting this, and we are very, very open to knowing more and to using more, because you are very right. How much of medicines can there be? For us also, we had not thought that we would be seeing so much of diabetes, but we are surprised. And post-COVID, the numbers have really grown, which is more because earlier, they had options of going elsewhere, which have come down. They have less money as well. So, but then they need not only medicines, they need a lot more.
Yes.
So,
also, doctor, one of the reasons that the sedentary lifestyle thanks to the COVID, that really brought out the fact that, we're all leading sedentary lives more than before, and this work from home culture in the cities. But like you rightly said, the forest area has shrunk. The number of fields, the acres of fields that were used have come down. So the people who were traditionally farming are no more farming. And so because of that, they are not walking or going out in the open as much as before. So that is why their livelihood has shrunk. Plus the fact that there's no exercise also causes a lot of problems in their health. Diabetes is one of the cases where at least the movement would help to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing, Sam, here is that while less people are into farming these days than earlier, but they still have to toil so much. So, for example, for getting water, they would have to walk a lot and get water. For getting firewood, they spend hours. So there is no dearth of physical work for them.
Okay.
So in fact, when we are, counseling, let's say a person with diabetes or hypertension, and we will advise that, you have to walk. So the person will look at us as if, we are not, he will say, I do that the whole day. I am walking the whole day.
Yes, true. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjana. So any more queries? Last question for today.
Shreya, I have a question.
Yes, Doctor.
Common question for Arohan. Shreya, do you have any plan to supply the study materials as a book at a lower price or free?
So the course is free. At the moment, we are still on I think this is our second series, but we're still trying to improve the course the most we can. And yes, if it's worth it, we'll definitely publish it for free. And we'll have more people, and this course will forever remain free. We're never going to charge for it. So I think that's definitely a food for thought, Dr. Ajay. Thank you. We'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
That was a very good, I think, point from Dr. Jain. Can we do one thing then to make it easier for Pallium India? I think, thank you for having this course free. But what I'm saying is this resource materials like this, what we could do is those of us who will be willing to volunteer to, give a small donation or something, so that those who can't afford it also in the group, whoever is qualified at the end of the 6 months course, the others will pull in, and if it is a nominal amount, we can all share together with the cost of making the resources available for everyone in the form of a book.
Yes, sir. Good suggestion. Good suggestion.
Thank you, everyone. Definitely noted. Lots of. I think that's a great idea. I'll make a note. But first of all, thank you, Dr. Sanjana, for taking time out of your busy schedule and spending this afternoon with us. And you're just such a gentle soul. And I think a lot of people have written that. Like I don't know, it was just such a lovely experience listening to you again. And for me again, but for the rest of everyone, the first time. And welcome to the Arohan family. There's a long way for us, and I hope that when we meet the next time during an Arohan session, you would have expanded and more would have happened and whatever you want to do. But thank you, Dr. Sanjana, for your time. It's really a pleasure having you with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Shreya. And it was a pleasure. It was a privilege to be here with all of you. And I am just so overwhelmed with all the good wishes that I am seeing in the chat box. But really, Shreya, I think it's a privilege which has come my way, and I feel fortunate to be able to do this. And it's the entire team here which is doing the hard work. So it's good to be with everyone.
Thank you so much. Just one announcement for the next session is on planning ahead, which will be taken by me. So that is an important session in terms of what we are going to do with this course. And yes, the suggestion from Dr. Ajayan and Sam for the book and everything is going to be taken. So it'll be more of a discussion session. So please be ready to discuss, bring in your feedback, because the assignment will be handed over 1 month before. On May 1st, we're having the last session where the participants would be presenting. So be ready with your suggestions. Whatever you have in mind, just come with all your questions, and I'll be sharing the format of the assignment. And so that's it from my end. And thank you, everyone. Have a lovely, lovely weekend. See you again next week, and take care of yourselves. Thank you. And please fill in the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.